this is Shanku, and in this video I'm going to talk about distributed configuration for a microservices ecosystem. So first we're going to see what problems we can face if we are not using distributed configuration, and then we'd see how we can solve those problems by using distributed configuration. So for the demo I have already created a few projects to save some time. So this is one project called location service. It doesn't use distributed configuration, and this is the application.properties. So first I'll close this. So this is the main this is the entry point for the application. It contains the main method and nothing else, and then we have this config class. So this is basically a configuration class, and we have this annotation called configuration properties. So when we annotate a class with this configuration properties, the values for these member variables are loaded from an external properties file. So in this case it's going to be this application.properties file. So here we have city, and for configuration properties we have the prefixes location, and then we have two member variables. We have city, which is a string, and then we have pin code, which is long. So these values would be injected. These values would be read from the application.properties file and would be injected into the bean for this class, and this is going to happen at the time when the application context would be loaded and the beans would be registered. And this is a controller. So this is a very simple controller. I've annotated this class as a REST controller, and we have this request mapping path. So this is the path for this API, and then we have a get mapping here. So it's just returning a location object. So location is nothing but a simple Pojo class for location. So let's just run this application and see what happens. So I'm going to say run as Spring Boot app, and we have set the server.port as 8585. So it's going to run on 8585 port. So let's run this. So this is the URL for our API, and I'm going to say send. Okay, so we have city as XYZ and pin code as 1111. So these values are read from here. Now let's make a change to this. Let's say city is ABC and pin code is 1234, and I'll save this. Now let's run this. Let's send this again, but the value doesn't change. So what happened is, when the bean was created, these values were injected into the bean, and now the beans are not reloaded. Even if we make a change in the properties, in the property values, the beans are not reloaded, and as a result they have the same value with which they were loaded. So again, if we want to make this change, if we want this change to reflect in our application, we have to restart the application. So let's do that. Okay, the application is up. Now let's run it. Okay, so this time we have city as ABC and then pin code as 1234. But this is not something we would want to do in a production environment. When our code is already live, and then if we have a change in the property file, and for that change to reflect in our application, we won't really want to restart our application when it's already live and when it's in production. So how can we do that without having to how can we make the changes reflect in our application without having to restart the application? So that is what distributed configuration is all about. So when we are using distributed configuration, it exposes certain endpoints using which we can reload our beans, and when the beans are reloaded, they are injected with the new values or the updated values for the properties. So let's take a look at how it works. So for that, I have created this configuration server. So this is another application. Let's see the dependencies that we have inside this project. So we have actuator dependency, we have string cloud config server dependency, we have Netflix Eureka client dependency. So that is a discovery server that I'm going to use. If you're not already familiar with discovery servers, then I would recommend you to pause this video and take a look at my other video where I talk about discovery servers, and specifically I talk about Eureka server, and I would put the link in the description below. And then we have dev tools, and then we have the starter test. So that is basically it. And then inside the application.property, so this is our URL which is going to hold the application files. So this is a GitHub URL that I've used, and this application, the configuration server is going to run on port number 8888, and the name with which it is going to be registered with our discovery server is config server. So let's take a look at this URL. Let's go to our web browser. So this is the URL. I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. So this is basically the repository which is going to hold our application property file. So this is the file that we're going to use. So this is called product service, the name, which is the name of our application, or which is the name of our service, and then this dev is the profile that we'll be using. So we can have multiple profiles. Ideally, in a real-time scenario, we'll be having multiple profiles like dev, QA, or maybe prod, staging, and stuff like that. So for the timing, I've just kept one profile, and that is called dev. So what else do we have inside this project? We have the entry point for this application, and here I've just mentioned @enable config server, so that this will make this application a configuration server. And then we have @enable Eureka client. So this this application would be registered with the discovery server as a Eureka, or rather, to be more specific, with the Eureka server as a client. So this annotation is going to make it a client for the Eureka server. So that is it for the configuration server. And then we have this Eureka discovery server project. So let's take a look at the dependencies first. So here we have a Spring Boot actuator, and then we have Netflix Eureka server. So this means that this application or this project would serve as a Eureka server or a discovery server for our microservices. And then we have dev tools and Spring Boot starter. So that is it. And let's take a look at this class. So it is basically saying enable Eureka server. So this application would behave as a Eureka server, and it would set up our Eureka server. So that is basically it. And then our microservice is called product service. So this is our microservice that is gonna read the configuration from our config server, which is points to this URL, which points to this repository, Git repository, that holds our properties for our application. So let's take a look at the POM. Let's see the dependencies. So we have starter web. So this is going to make our application a web application. And then we have cloud. starter config. So this would make this would enable our project to use a distributed configuration. And then we have Netflix Eureka client. This would enable us or our project to register itself with our Eureka server. And then we have dev tools and starter test, and then we have this configuration processor and Spring Boot actuator. So let's take a look at the classes that we have. So this is okay. Let's first take a look at this class. So this is a very basic application that I've created, and this class is annotated with configuration properties. So the values for these member variables are going to be injected from an external application from an external properties file. So in this case, the properties file is present in our GitHub URL, GitHub repository, and it's going to fetch the property values by talking to the configuration server. And that's not going to happen directly. It is going to first get itself registered with the discovery server, and the configuration server and the microservice are going to talk to each other through the discovery server and not directly. So these are the properties that we have: product ID and product name. So let's take a look at the configuration. So we have set the product ID as PID -1003 and then product name as Dell Laptop 1, right? And these properties are the property values are going to be injected when the bean is created for this class, and when it registers itself as a bean with the application context. And then I have annotated this class as a REST controller, so this is going to behave as a REST controller, and this endpoint is going to fetch us the product details. So here I've printed the product ID and product name, and then I'm just returning the name and the ID for the product. Okay, so let's see how this behaves, and let's see how this works. So first I'm going to start the discovery server. Okay, so let's take a look at the dashboards. This is going to be our dashboard. If I refresh it now, yeah, because the application is not yet started. Alright, so our discovery server or our Eureka server is up. Now let's reload this. So right now we have only the Eureka server registered with itself. Now let's start the configuration server. So the configuration server is going to register itself with the discovery server, which is essentially a Eureka server that we're using. And let's refresh this. Okay, now we have the configuration server registered with the discovery server. Alright, now let's take a look at the configuration server. So this is the configuration server URL, and we can read the properties from our GitHub URL, from our GitHub repository. So these are the property values that we have in our GitHub repository for product service application. So and these are the various endpoints that are exposed when we use distributed configuration. So this is the name of the service that we are using, and this is the profile. So if we send this request, we're gonna get the property values here. So we have the application name as product service, and then port as 8383, product ID as PID-1003, and then product name as Dell Laptop 1. and if you make a change here, it's going to reflect there. So let's try to do that. I say instead of Dell, I'll say Lenovo laptop, say 1.0. I'll commit the changes. Okay, now let's send this again. Okay, so we have the product name as Lenovo laptop 1.0. So the changes reflect here. Now let's run our microservice. Do we have it running? No. Let's start it. Alright, there's one more thing that I've done. I have this bootstrap.properties file here, and we have the properties application name, which is product service, and this is a URL for our configuration server or our config server URI. And then we have set the property, we have set the profile as dev, and the property is going to expose the URLs or the endpoints that are provided by the configuration server. So I guess we have our product service registered with the discovery server. Let's refresh this. Okay, so we have our product service registered with the discovery server. Now let's try to run. Let's try to run our product service. So it is running on 8383. So that is defined here. So it's running on 8383. So our product service is running on 8383. And then let's take a look at the controller. This one, yeah, this one. So this /test is going to fetch us the product name and the product ID. So let's hit the URL. So this is the value that we are getting from here, Lenovo laptop 1.0 and PID -1003. So these are the values that we are getting from our GitHub repository that holds our properties. So let's make a change now to this. Okay, I'm gonna set the product ID as Dell D500, and I'm gonna set the product name as Dell model D500. Right, I'm gonna save this using commit changes. Let's see if our configuration server has picked up these changes from our GitHub repository. So let's click on send. Okay, so our configuration server has picked up the changes from our GitHub repository, and now we have the product ID as Dell D500 and then the product name as Dell model D500, right? Now let's see if our application or our microservice has picked up these changes or not. So it has still not picked up the changes because we haven't refreshed the beans, or rather this bean. We haven't refreshed this product config bean that is registered with our application context. So how do we refresh that? So the config server exposes this URL, actuator refresh. So using this, we can refresh the beans and reload them into the application context. And when we reload that the beans into the application context, they're gonna get injected with the new values for the properties. So let's send this. All right, now let's hit send here. Okay, so we have the new property values, Dell model D500 and Dell dash D500. So without having to restart our application, we could reload the property values, and we could whatever changes we had made in our properties file, that got reflected into our application without having to restart the application. So that is how a config server works, and that is the problem that config server solves. And yeah, ideally we won't be we won't be wanting to restart our application in the production environment just to have our application property just to have the property changes reflect in our application. So we'll be wanting to use a config server in that case. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.